They're from a group, I'm getting signals from the back. They're from a group called Yours Truly. We meet at my house once a month for 3 hours to identify, develop, edit, and learn our stories. And we do it together because we all help each other with it. So that's what's happening, and these tellers today have done that. So you'll be hearing personal stories, and we're gonna get right to it. Our first teller tells the story, What's in a Name? Welcome, Karen Percal.
I'm just gonna tell you, I'm gonna try it over here, but if my leg starts to shake, I'm gonna move over there. Okay. My name's Karen Percal. Can I lower this? My name's Karen Percal. I mean, obviously you know that. Ann just said that, Karen Percal. And according to the woman at Staples, I'm the only person in the entire universe with that name. Perhaps in another universe, that purported parallel one, there is another person with my same name, having my same life. And if this woman does exist, she may be having the same struggles with that name as I am. Very different than the ones we had as children. When I was a kid, it was all about the spelling, which is probably what makes it so unique in the first place. See, in my case, Karen is spelled C-A-R-O-N. I was named after my great-great-grandmother, whose name was Cora. My parents didn't want to name me that because they thought it was too old-fashioned. It was sort of the pearl or ruby, the hazel of my time. So they took the C from Cora, twisted things around a bit, and named me Karen with a C and an O. Of course, now I have friends whose daughters are named Cora and Pearl and Ruby, Hazel, maybe even Myrtle are all the rage. But back then, girls had names like Mary and Sue, Ellen, Elizabeth, and Karen with a K. Back then, we didn't want to be unique or different. See, there goes my leg. We didn't want to be unique or different. We didn't want to stand out. We were taught to fit in. Be good, be nice, be quiet, cross your legs at the ankles, say please, say thank you, mind your elders, and don't make waves. Whatever you do, don't stand out. Be like everyone else, and you'll be just fine. So right away, my name was a problem. A first day of school substitute teacher kind of problem. The kind of problem that made the whole class laugh when they called out Carone or Carson or Caron. Let's not even go to the place where they mispronounced my last name and called me Perkle. There was a time in the 3rd grade when I changed my name to Faye, my middle name. In those days, they sent notes home to your parents for doing things like that. So Faye didn't last long, and I don't think I really liked it anyway. I was just trying to escape the laughter. But the kids who'd known me since kindergarten still laughed. Faye? Who's Faye? Faye was a small rebellion that lived inside of me. Faye knew in a decade or so, there was a women's movement coming. Faye knew quiet and conformity weren't going to cut it for a lifetime. And maybe that's because Faye was short for Fanny, my grandmother on my father's side, a suffragette. But of course, I'm glad my parents did it again and just went for the first initial instead of the full-bore Fanny. We all know the nicknames that could have come from that. So Karen with a C was enough to bear. Over time, I learned to love my name, the way it's spelled. Honestly, I don't even relate to the name Karen with a K. I feel like a whole different Karen. I have a friend who calls me Karen, not Karen, because she gets it. And maybe Karen with a C and an O is a whole different Karen. If you're into numerology, it certainly is. The adding up of the letters as numbers gives each name a whole different vibration. And in some belief systems, a whole different ruling planet. One is ruled by the planet Venus, the planet of love, and the other is ruled by Mars, the warrior planet. So am I a lover or a warrior? Well, it seems in recent years, social media has told me exactly what that name says I am. An entitled complainer. And my twisted little spelling hasn't helped me a bit. because whether I'm calling Spectrum about my bill or Verizon, calling to make a doctor's appointment, putting my name in at a restaurant, or introducing myself to someone new, I have to say, my name is Karen, and no one is checking the spelling. They're just listening to that name hit their ear, Karen. And they've read the headlines, seen the memes, heard the podcasts, watched the videos gone viral on YouTube. Central Park Karen calls police on bird-watching African-American man, claiming he was threatening her and her dog. Gelson's worker dances while Karen throws tantrum over supermarket's mask policy. Woman dubbed Boohoo Karen after airport meltdown goes viral. Elon Musk nicknamed Space Karen after tweeting doubts about COVID-19 tests. And it goes on and on. And there it was, that old shame again over my name. I noticed my voice going low, or myself making a joke when asked for my name, apologizing to those that man the phones at Chewy or Gap, tech support at Apple. Even when meeting one of my stepfather's caretakers last year in Austin. You seem pretty nice, she said to me. Not like a Karen at all. My daughter's always telling me, don't be a Karen. And in case you've been under a rock and don't know what a Karen is, it started out as a moniker for a blonde, middle-aged white woman who asked to see the manager when met with something to her disliking. And that wasn't great, because it took me a long time to speak up and say when I was unhappy with something. I used to buy things and never return them, no matter what. The whole act seemed too embarrassing. I didn't want to make waves and ask for my money back. So they sat in the corner in their original bag, taunting me. My brother was in the restaurant business, and he started to tell me to send things back when they weren't good. Okay, so Big Brother approved. It's okay to complain. But now I have to say, my name is Karen. And I know what they're thinking. Of course it is, eyes rolling. And I want to say, you don't get it. When I grew up, I had to eat every freaking thing on my plate, whether I liked it or not. And my shoes were not fun with little rollers and butterflies and bright pink laces when I was a kid. My shoes were something my mother picked out that I hated, but were good for my arches. An embarrassment to be seen in. It's taken me forever, like 6 decades, to say, I don't like this. I'm not a Karen. I'm a woman who has finally come out of her shell, who is finally speaking up. Like it or not, deeper into the 2020s, as the virus mutated, widened its expanse, so did the term Karen. People were posting Karens everywhere. And these Karens weren't just sending a bad meal back. They were racists, they were flat earthers, they were COVID deniers. They hated blacks and masks and anything that got in the way of anything they wanted to do. From the BBC to Time Magazine to NPR, they were everywhere. These Karens were calling the police on everyone, especially people that weren't white. It got to the point where I didn't even want to say, hi, it's Auntie Karen, when I called my own 2 nieces. I thought everyone was thinking they knew exactly who I was because of my name. And it's just so silly because I know how that goes. These judgments made on outside things like name, style of dress, age. I mean, I was once in a group setting, telling some people about some of my struggles. Afterwards, a woman came up to me and said, "I thought women with hair like yours had perfect lives." I was like, what does she mean? Like blonde, kind of straight, longish? But you know, I knew exactly what she meant. One time I worked with this woman, and she was married with children, and I was so envious of her. One day she walked into my office and said, "You know, I wish I were just like you, single and independent." Each of us was jealous of the other. Neither one of us wanted to be who we are. And you know, sometimes I am a Karen, just a bit disgruntled, speaking up about it, wanting my way, making judgments about people's intentions with very little information. But most of the time, I'm Karen with a C and an O. Unique, indescribable, unmemeable, just like you.
Thank you, Karen Percal. Now we're going a little bit out of order. I'm going to ask if Shifra Wilder can come up next and tell her story. It's called The Portrait.
The day I'd eagerly been waiting for. I'm sorry. Is that okay? Okay. The day I'd eagerly been waiting for finally arrived. I was in the bathroom with my mom getting prepared. I sat on her 1960s Formica countertop in between two pink porcelain sinks, and I watched my mother set my hair. As she set my hair, she put two pin curls on either sides, and she said, "Sit up straight, honey." And then she began to awkwardly cut my bangs crooked. I looked in the mirror and I thought, I'm pretty. I like my smile. I was happy with all the attention I was getting. Today, I was having my fly removed. No, I was having, get out of here. I was having my professional portrait taken. My brothers, much older than I, Stephen and Scott, they had their portraits taken. At around the same age, 4 years old, 3 or 4. And my brother Scott, he was smiling. He was wearing a yellow colored white shirt, and he had brown shorts on, and he had his hand lifted up to the side. And I thought, that's odd. I'm gonna get this fly. That's odd. Why is he holding his hand up? Cut, no. Is it the perfume? I'm not wearing it. Why is he holding his hand up? I thought that was really odd. And my brother Stephen, he was looking straight in the camera. He had his arms folded across his chest on top of a table. He was wearing a green polo shirt with a blue collar, and he didn't look happy at all to be having his photo taken. Well, now it was my turn, and I decided I'm gonna smile for my portrait. So my dad, mom, and I climbed in our yellow station wagon. This is hilarious. This fly is like circling. Climbed in our yellow station wagon and drove from Saugus to Boston. And we approached the humongous green steel Tobin Bridge. Oh my gosh, I feel like starting again, but no. We crossed this green steel Tobin Bridge, and I loved the way the tires sounded on the bridge. Kaplunk, kaplunk, kaplunk. And when my dad threw the coins into the basket for the toll, ka-ching, ka-ching, Well, we crossed the bridge, and my dad parked in Haymarket Square near the train station. And above our heads, we heard the noisy Orange Line come screeching to a halt. Well, walking in my new black patent leather shoes and mint green, neatly pressed dress with a lace collar, I was dressed for the day. I was holding my mother's hand in my right and my father's tightly in my left. And again I would yell, 1, 2, 3, swing! And they would lift me up off the ground and swing me in between their arms. And it was thrilling until I heard, okay, that's enough. I was still holding Mom and Dad's hand and kept pace, half skipping, half walking down the blocks. And being with Mom and Dad together at the same time, just the three of us, that was a rarity. Well, we walked down the street and saw rows of vendors, and they were selling fruits and vegetables on plywood makeshift tabletops supported by sawhorses. And everybody was just talking and joking and yelling and laughing, and my senses just came alive. And the surroundings of my first day in Boston, it was bustling. Well, we covered several more blocks, and we eventually arrived at a 3-story red brick building. There were many of them lining the street. Here. Many of them lining the street. And stairs went down under the street, and stairs went up to the top front entrance of each building. What a sight. This was such a new experience. All the buildings squished together. We walked into the front of one huge building and approached the wooden stairs, and they were worn smooth. And I jumped up a few stairs until I heard, okay, stop it. So I did. We walked down a dimly lit hallway, and I could hear my new shoes click-clacking on the stone floor. And at the end of the hallway was a dark painted door. And my dad knocked on the door, and the photographer, a slender man with gold-rimmed glasses, said, come on in. So as Mom and Dad talked with the photographer, I curiously looked all around the studio. It was fascinating. The photographer instructed me to climb up on the platform, and I did, and he positioned me sitting sideways and crossed my legs slightly at the ankle. And he began taking photos. Click, click. And then he said, okay, now big smile. Big smile? I was already grinning from ear to ear. How much bigger could I smile? So he began taking more photos and more positions, and he said, okay, now lift up your hand and hold it out. There was that hand thing again that my brother Scott did in his photo. I didn't understand it, but I was afraid to ask, so I said nothing. And so there were more clicks. I was distracted by this fly. More clicks, more photos. I was basking in the attention that I was being given. All eyes on me. The warm, bright lights. I reveled in the feeling of that. Couple more photos, couple more clicks, couple more positions, and we were done. I wanted this moment to last longer. And then Mom said, okay, honey, climb down off the platform. Carefully. I jumped down off that platform and landed my shiny black shoes like a gymnast finishing her performance. Ta-da! It felt wonderful. We walked out of the building and down a few more blocks and across the street to the public gardens. And this was a whole new world. There were ponds lined with weeping willow trees and bridges and bright green grass and beautiful flowers and ducks and swans and the famous swan boat ride. I had only seen pictures of this in the book Make Way for Ducklings. This was amazing. I was allowed to walk around freely and talk to the swans and the ducks. Quack, 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 quack. And they swam towards me, hoping to get a morsel of food. This was the absolute best day in my life. I was so happy, and I was free. Well, I don't remember hardly anything of the ride home. And I don't remember ever being with my parents together, just mom, dad, and myself, spending the day together. Since then, my parents have passed, as have my brother, Stephen and Scott. And that day, seeds were planted at that tender age of 4. The feeling of being the center of attention, all eyes on me. The clicks of the camera, the bright, warm lights. It was a high. It was an attention-seeking high. And when I was 19, I moved from Boston to California, chasing that attention-seeking high. And I did have a brief career as a model. I modeled in Los Angeles and in New York. And that high became destructive. I developed an eating disorder. And I hated my body, and I hated myself. The innocence of the child, gone. And nearly 60 years later, with gray hair and slight wrinkles, I look at my reflection in the bathroom mirror and think, I'm as pretty as that little girl ever was. It took me until now to realize that I don't have to chase that attention-seeking high. I'm happy and content, just as I am, just as that little girl was. And occasionally I look at my gold frame, hand-tinted portrait of myself, and I chuckle. Mint green dress, lace collar, hands on the platform under my chin, and precisely as planned, I am smiling.
Show them what you did when you remembered.
Oh, I forgot. See, that was the whole part that distracted me. Back to the public gardens. That experience was so meaningful to me. In fact, 8 years ago, I had the longitude and latitude of the public gardens tattooed on my upper arm and in my heart.
Thank you, Shifra. Thank you. Oh, and this fly, I don't know. Glad it's not, We'll have to talk about that, how to keep going in the face of adversity. Okay, our next teller tells a story called Pushing Myself. Welcome, Lydia Cruz Mockwitz.
To celebrate my 70th birthday in October, I want to face one of my challenges. I want to jump out of an airplane with a parachute, of course. Wait a minute, no, I'm not doing that, no way. If I jump out of that plane, I'm going to be so scared that I will forget to press that button to open the parachute, and I will drop down like a sack of potatoes, breaking all 206 bones in my body. I'm not doing that. See, I thought as I'm getting older and wiser, I will be this fearless woman. But in fact, it's been the opposite. I'm getting a little afraid of trying new things. And not only that, I'm afraid of things I was not afraid to do before. Let me give you just two examples of those fears. One of those fears is traveling. I love traveling. And my second example is the most ridiculous one. I'm afraid of the rain. Do you guys remember the recent rainy days we had? Well, my friends, my best friend and her husband invited my husband and I for a dinner at a restaurant, and we accepted. I was looking forward to see them because we hadn't seen them for a while. But it started to rain that night, and I thought, I'm gonna get wet, and then I might catch a cold. Oh my God, worse yet, we might have an accident in the freeway. Wait a minute, I thought. ¿Estás hecha de papel? Are you made out of paper now? I'm Puerto Rican. I grew up in a tropical island. It rained there almost every day. What if I get wet? What if I catch a cold? And am I going to melt like the Witch of the West? Dave is a great driver, and he's driving. We're not having any accident. Lydia, you're going, I told myself. And we went and we had a great time. My friends told us all about their trip to Australia and shared pictures of their adorable grandchildren. We talked about our plans to go to Vietnam and complained that we still have no grandchildren. They told us, oh, here is an idea. Since your daughter and her husband are business people, why don't you send them a PowerPoint presentation with a refresher on how to make babies? What a great idea. We laughed. We had such a good time. I'm so happy that I defied the rain and pushed myself. But you know what? I'm not sure if I can do that, to travel overseas. Dave and I had plans to go to Vietnam. And I loved the idea at the beginning. We were going in November, so by the end of October, I was not too happy about going. Why? Because as I told my friends and family, they would say things like, why do you want to go to a communist country? With so many beautiful places in America, why do you want to go there? What if you catch COVID or malaria or one of those weird diseases? And I thought, oh my God, they are right. What am I thinking? Then I started to picture these soldiers with bayonets watching all our moves. And then what if we really catch COVID there? What would we do? I'm not going. But then I thought about Dave. He was so excited. And also we had paid for the trip and we had everything arranged already. So I kind of had to push myself, and I thought, okay, what can I control? I know. So I took my suitcase and took a quarter of my suitcase and turned it into a drugstore. I even got the antiviral tablets in case we got COVID. We got all the vaccinations necessary or whatever they recommended. We even got extra health insurance in case we had to spend more time there. Well, my friends, we went there for 2 weeks. We didn't even get a mosquito bite, not even a headache. And we had such a wonderful time. The people of Vietnam are very friendly. Many of them spoke English, and if they didn't, I used my hand. As you can see, I'm very good at it. And that's how we communicated. There were fresh fruits and vegetables everywhere and the tastiest noodles. I admired the beauty of Vietnam, their monuments. And of course, we made time to go to museums that gave us information about the Vietnam War and its sad consequences. The only time when I was a little afraid was when we went to the Ho Chi Minh Mausoleum, and we had to go in a single file silently to a little room that was dark to me, and then we walked for about 3 minutes in silence to see the corpse and get out. But that was nothing really. I'm so glad I got out of my comfort zone and pushed myself to go there. Of course, it helps that Dave was by my side. But you know what? I have to be aware as I'm getting older. I have to be aware that I don't obey all my fears. I know sometimes they're going to take over, but I have to make sure that doesn't happen very often. And you know what? I decided I'm going to jump out of that plane after all. But to make it more impactful, I'm going to wait to do it to celebrate my 80th birthday. Thank you.
Thank you, Lydia. Yeah, we need to push ourselves sometimes. Things happen. Okay, now we're going to have Debbie Palmer Siegel tell a story entitled Home Sweet Home. Welcome, Debbie.
Can I make this a little lower? Yeah? Can you? Okay. I've been in my current home for over 24 years, and I am settled. But it hasn't always been like this. My mother was married and divorced 6 times. She had twins, my sister Ruth Ann and I, when she was 17. And we went to over a dozen schools and lived in over a dozen homes. It was a rocky adventure. The first home I remember was in an apartment in New York City, in Queens, New York. There, my twin, my mom, and I lived with our beautiful collie, Laddie. He jumped out the car window one day, right over my lap. We never saw him again. I couldn't understand why we couldn't find him. We had a black and white TV, and I remember watching Captain Kangaroo and seeing our president, John F. Kennedy, getting shot and killed on that television. Mom said that on that day, they played What the World Needs Now is Love, Sweet Love, all day, that day. Right after that, Mom said to us, I'm taking you to visit your dad. Our dad, he was a stranger to us, and obviously very nervous around 2 4-year-old girls. He asked us, what would you like? I immediately said, ice cream. He took out a paper plate and a half gallon of ice cream and dumped most of that ice cream onto the paper plate. And I remember thinking, I think I'm gonna get away with a lot with this one. Unknowingly, my mom just hopped on a plane and moved to California that day. After Mom left, Ruth Ann and I moved in with our grandparents. They lived in Queens too, but in a house with a backyard, and Grandpa used to spray us with the hose. There were grapevines in that backyard, and I think they reminded Grandpa of Italy. From there, we lived with my favorites, Aunt Kat, Aunt Maria, Uncle Johnny, and my 2 younger cousins. Aunt Maria looked just like Rita Wilson. I remember fantasizing that she had a secret life as a singer. From there, we were shipped up to some camp, upstate New York, surrounded by strangers. It was really scary. And I got reprimanded for picking up after my twin there. And I was confused by that. I remember telling them, my mom told me to take care of my twin. Shortly after that, 9 months after my mom took off to California, my Aunt Marguerite came and said, I'm taking you to California to live with your mom. We hopped on a plane, flew to California, and lived in Hollywood with my mom in an apartment. Then the three of us moved to another apartment in North Hollywood, where my Aunt Kathy, Uncle Joe, 2 younger sisters moved next door. Aunt Kathy used to babysit us when Mom went to work. She'd sit on that front step and smoke cigarettes with the neighbors. From there, we moved to another house in North Hollywood. It had a backyard, above-ground swimming pool, and a new stepdad. That's where my 2 younger sisters were born, Susie and Denise. I got teased so often in that neighborhood that I was afraid to walk down the sidewalk. The object of the teasing was my butt. I remember practicing trying to walk without my butt moving. Can you imagine? It didn't work. It never worked. But I was truly comforted by my dog. He was an Irish Terrier, all white, 2 brown ears, 1 up and 1 down. Her name was Bonnie Buckle Blue. And Bonnie Buckle Blue ran away from home almost as often as Ruth Ann and I did. We walked to St. James Francis School in that neighborhood from 1st to 3rd grade until we moved again. This time into a house, a beautiful new house in Newhall, surrounded by mountains. I had a beautiful Doberman pinscher named Prince. We hiked every day. Prince was my protector, and I felt safe around him, except for one time when I watched the vet cut his pointing ears and I fainted. Soon, in 7th grade, Mom divorced our stepdad, and we moved back with our grandparents, this time in Van Nuys. Then in 8th grade, we left our grandparents and moved into a townhouse in Northridge. This is where I started smoking cigarettes, smoking marijuana, drinking alcohol, drinking Southern Comfort and 7-Up. This is where we met our second stepdad. His name was Vince. He liked to drink every day. He once complimented me on my full lips. Luckily, Vince was harmless. This is also where we met our dad for the first time since we left New York. We're now teenagers. I recognized him immediately. As soon as I saw him at LAX, he looked just like his pictures, tall, muscular, same face as my twin. I remember telling him upon that stay, "Thanks, Dad, for not hitting on me." My dad said, "Do not thank me for not being a pervert." From there, we moved to, from there, we moved to a house in Granada Hills. It was a beautiful corner house right down the street from my mom's key punching business. For the rest of 8th grade and all of 9th grade, I hitchhiked to school. After 9th grade, after my graduation, I got tired of going to a school so far away. So I wound up going to the school in my new neighborhood, the new high school. It was horrible. It was hard making friends. Ruth Ann and I had always shared a bedroom. In Newhall, we had bunk beds. I was on top, staring at pictures of David Cassidy on my ceiling. Then after that, we had twin beds with a dresser in between us. Ruth Ann moved out. I got a king-size waterbed. I painted the shutters in my room chocolate brown, the walls cream color, and made my room cozy. It was the first time I ever had my own bedroom. I had an Irish setter. Her name was Sheba. Sheba slept with me every night. I graduated high school moved into an apartment right off the 101 freeway in Tarzana. Here I had 2 jobs. I worked full-time as a cocktail waitress at a private country club and also as an after-school playground coach while putting myself through college full-time. It was really hard work, but I loved the independence. 2 years later, my mom showed up at my front door with my 2 younger sisters in tow. She looked at me and said, "Take them. I can't take it anymore." My roommate moved out. My sisters moved in. My boyfriend at the time, Herbie, told me, "If you take your sisters in, our relationship will end." I replied, "So be it. These are my sisters and they need me. I must take care of them." Thank God, Herbie was just bluffing. We got married 5 years later. We built a beautiful house in Studio City, which we brought my 2 younger sisters to live with us there. That's where my daughter was born. It was a wonderful place. We were surrounded by mountains and we were close to everything. LA, Beverly Hills, Hollywood. We had many, many pets there. My favorite was a black lab. Her name was Babe. She had a tendency to visit us way after she left her body. From there, we decided to build our dream house on the beach on Malibu Road. We lived there for 4 years until my husband passed away from cancer. I was forced to sell our dream house to find someplace more affordable. So then Jolie and I moved to Western Malibu, where nothing is close, except the ocean and the mountains, and that's enough. Here I got Yogi Bear. She's a rescue of my life. Part terrier, part sheepdog, part hound dog, all love. She loved hiking the mountains and chasing the birds on the street. Now I have Shakti. She is a cat, my COVID kitty. Shakti is so sweet. She's a big time talker. Sometimes her meows are so soft and sweet. Other times they're really loud and kind of demanding and obnoxious. But she sleeps with me every night. Growing up and moving so often gave me a deep appreciation for being put and focusing on lasting relationships. I was with my husband for 19 years until he passed away. Currently, I've been in my relationship with Eric for over 20 years. I too am nourished by nature, am nourished by my relationships, and feel blessed to be so close to all the nature surrounding me, blessed to have all the animals who helped me throughout my life. I too, like the trees in nature, am rooted into the earth, into my community, and into my relationships. Life is good. It is my home, home, sweet home.
Thank you, Debbie. Okay, we have another teller. She's going to tell a story entitled Monticello School for Girls. Welcome, Patty Hollow. Sure.
This is the Monticello School for Girls. Can you get closer to the mic? This way? Don't touch the mic, just get closer to it. Just get closer, okay, well, am I close enough? Can anybody hear me? It's not right. It's not on. I don't think it's working.
It's working, go ahead.
Can you hear me? No. Okay, I'll try it this one.
Yeah, try that.
I'm gonna try that.
Yay!
I'm not that brave.
Is this all right?
Yes.
The question for me became what to do with me for my 4th grade year. it was the same problem as before. My grandmother, the actress, booked a musical touring company, in a musical touring company. And my father was finally got a permanent job at Warner Brothers as a sound technician. And I was in my 4th grade, and they really didn't know what to do with me. So I saw them whispering, and I knew something was up. When they weren't looking, I peeked into my grandmother's desk, and sure enough, I saw all these boarding schools circled. The one they seemed to like was called the Monticello School for Girls, and the subtitle was, "An English School for Girls Refined from Good Homes." I wasn't quite sure what that meant, but I knew I always said please and thank you, so I guess that was it. But I didn't like the looks of the picture. It was big and scary looking, and like a falling down mansion with big iron fences around it. But I thought, well, I won't pay any attention to it. And then sure enough, about a month later, they were dragging me off the sidewalk, and I tried to get away. And of course they wouldn't let me, they knew. And I thought, what am I gonna do? Just then, this house mistress came out and she said, "Hello, my name is Mrs. McBride, and I'm to be your new charge." She was the scariest looking woman I've ever seen. Really, she had beige hair, beige skin. Even the dandruff that fell on her worn black suit was beige sprinkles. I wanted to run, and I couldn't. She invited us in for a few moments into the sitting room, which was very grand and ornate. And then before I knew it, she told my family they had to leave because it was a better place for me to not have to worry about them leaving. And of course I was scared. My legs were shaking, but I didn't cry. She grabbed me firmly and dragged me up these big, wide, double staircase with these pictures of old people in oil paints on the wall. I was nervous. It was kind of a very scary experience. When I got up to the 4th grade dorm, it was as dry and Spartan and as underfurnished as the downstairs was ornate. There were 6 twin beds, iron, facing each other, and old chenille bedspreads. And we were told to put our nightgowns under the pillows. I guess it was so we wouldn't forget what bed was ours. They all looked alike. And then we were taken to a communal clothing area, a closet, and there it was, one section for school, one section for play clothes, one section for dinner clothes, and an occasional ball gown for some sort of ball that was to happen at the end of the year with the boys from Page Academy down the street. It was pretty daunting. And the food, oh my God, the food was absolutely inedible. It was some sort of a goulash every night. But it had a name, each time it had a name. Tonight we're having beef bourguignon. Tonight we're having shepherd's pie a la king. Well, I was brave enough to ask, and of course I didn't know. They asked me what I was eating. I had no idea. And my punishment was to eat every bite on my plate. And of course, this was just horrible because I had been living on hot dogs the summer before with another grandmother who was completely senile and let me eat whatever I wanted and whatever I wanted. So I was miserable. I didn't eat much, but I sort of had to give in to the program. The one thing I remember so clearly was on Wednesday afternoons, they had what was called a picnic. And we got sandwiches. The sandwiches weren't important, but we got a Hershey bar. And that sort of remained my favorite thing. To this day, my husband still buys me Hershey bar candies and hides them away. So when I have an attack of the Hershey's, he's got them for me. Anyway, we were up in my 4th grade dorm, and the little girls were always so hungry, and particularly for sweets. And we'd heard that there was a bin of cookies way down in the kitchen, and everybody wanted to know if we could get any, and I sort of got elected because I was just slightly older than the other girls, but because I had been brave enough to ask what we had for dinner. So one of the older girls kind of told us where to go, but I was the only one who would do it, and it was down a double dark stairway toward the back of the house, and obviously old servants' quarters. And when I got down to the kitchen, I noticed the door to Mrs. McBride's room was cracked open. So I sort of tiptoed around, and I actually had to find the bin first. And on the third try, I found the cookie bin. Sure enough, there were all these cookies. But I had forgotten what to put them in. So I took my nightgown and I folded it up and I put as many cookies as I could in the thing and dropped a few. And that's when Mrs. McBride started screaming, "Who's there? Who's there?" And I froze. However, I realized I really wanted those cookies, and my little girls upstairs were waiting for the cookies. So I took the whole thing, scooped it, tied the thing, and I flew up those dark stairs. It was very scary, but I was light and small, and I got through it. And when I got to that dorm, I was greeted like a hero. We put the cookies out on the bin, and we ate every single bite. There wasn't a crumb left, and we were grateful because Mrs. McBride never figured it out, or she never had the energy to get back up those double flights of stairs. And there were many more escapades, but I have to go to the one that was the very nicest for me. It turned out a few months later, one of the mothers was coming into town and told her daughter that she could pick 4 friends to go to a movie and to dinner and shopping. It was like, I don't know how to explain it. It was the biggest treat I think I ever heard of. And I wasn't one of the older ones, so everybody was standing around her, pick me, please, pick me. And she picked her 3 friends, and I was standing off to the side. And then she looked over and she said, "I picked Chit Chit. That was my nickname. Why me?" I had no idea. I didn't ask. I couldn't figure it out, but I don't know how to explain what the honor was to be picked and to get out of that awful school for a few hours. And sure enough, she took us to everything. We went to the movies where we saw Debbie Reynolds singing and dancing, and then to a hamburger stand where I finally got my hot dogs that I had been used to living on at the beach months ago with the senile grandmother who let me do whatever I wanted. And then shopping. So we went into this store. As it turns out, it was Sears, because you'll recognize what they had there. We tried on clothes and we sprayed perfume with each other, and then we found the foot machine. And the foot machine lets you put your feet into the thing and x-ray them. And it was just a treat. We looked at our toes. My toes were big, my feet were bony, and we laughed. I mean, it was just the most amazing thing to be there and then to look at our feet in an x-ray. But anyway, the day finally came to an end, and we were still giggling in the car, and I just didn't want to go back to that school, but it was something I know. I remember it all these years later. Well, my 4th grade finally came to an end, and my dad finally got us a home in the Hollywood Hills, got me a new stepmother, got me a new public school, and it was fine. I was without any of the rules of the boarding school. And I started telling my friends all about my escapades. And of course I exaggerated. I wanted to entertain them with my stories of bravery and regale them all the silly things that happened, including the cookie caper and the food that we had to eat. And pretty soon I realized I was telling it because I wanted to tell myself just how brave I really was.
To stay up here and get that applause, Patty. Thank you, Patty. Now, the next story is entitled, "I Did It." Welcome, Eileen Fiore.
Is there any way to fix the mic?
Let's see.
Is this working now? It's not working, is it?
You might want to try to change the plug-in real quick.
I didn't work that hard. No, she did work hard.
I can try what I did.
You know, I will say that these stories, we did all work together hard on them, but they change. Stories are alive, and sometimes they change as you begin to learn them. And this was what happened. Thanks.
There's
Yeah, I think it's okay now, you can hear me? Okay. This wasn't the future I had imagined. Fear almost paralyzed me. It was 1986 when I started. I was 46 in the middle of a divorce. How could I stand up to those Century City lawyers? My therapist would tell me, if you don't do it, who will? And I did. I found a way to keep my house. Then in 1989, I became a teacher. And I began hiking, exploring the Santa Monica Mountains. I was beginning to find myself again, finding new reserves. Then I met Steve. He told me his plans to hike in the high Sierras that summer. The words were barely out of my mouth when I said, I want to go with you. Steve quietly said, it will be a difficult hike, lots of elevation gain from Tuolumne Meadows through Mono Pass. I said, we can train together. And he took me on and we trained, and the day came. We filled our pack with camp stove, lots of dry food, energy bars, clothing, anything for survival. Each of us would be carrying about 50 pounds. The Sierras were breathtaking, flowery meadows, snow-capped mountains. I slowed down the group. That night, Steve made a hammock on the side of the mountain, and we fell asleep looking at the stars. Others went up and over and down ahead of us. At the first summit, I yelled, I fucking made it! Proud, but exhausted. Our turn to go down and down. About midway, my knee began to throb. Steve, I'm so sorry. I apologized to him 100 times. He never frowned, he never sighed, never made me feel guilty or inadequate, nothing. He said, you're doing great. We spent the night in the middle of nowhere. Well, but we were surrounded by forest, beautiful stream and ponds, water weaving in and out of the huge rocks. Then we hear clop, 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 clop. 2 men with 6 mules approached us. What's happening? I said, I can't walk anymore. My knee is hurting too much. No problem, the men said, and the 2 mules obliged us, and 2 others carried our pack. We were safe. When I remember that hike now, I think of the patience and the goodwill of Steve. How I trusted him, never afraid. I think of the sunrises and sunsets I witnessed without artificial lighting. We slept and rose with the sun. It felt right, peaceful. I remember the generosity of those 2 backpackers who shared fresh rainbow trout with us, caught right from the stream. I simmered it in chicken bouillon over a camp stove. Was anything ever so delicious? I did it. I did it. Of course, with the help from the mules. My therapist was right. If I didn't do it, who will? Year by year, I continue to thrive. Fear almost, I say almost, excites me now. I know it's an opportunity, whether it is telling stories or writing sonnets. Each time I discover more of myself.
Thank you, Eileen. Now we have someone going to tell about Grandma Murty. Welcome, Karen Miller.
I am a grandmother, and my greatest joy is in spending time with my grandchildren, hugging, playing games like make-believe, fantasy, superhero, while they go through interesting phases of their life. I live with my two adorable grandchildren and participate in all their activities. A very satisfying relationship of excitement and all this attention, which reminds me that I never had a grandmother. I've always wondered what effect this had on my life. Both of my grandmothers died long before I was born. Their premature deaths have been a mystery to me all my life. And recently, some of my cousins have been telling me stories about them. And I have begun to understand their terrible existence. Myrta Ryan Land, my paternal grandmother, was born in Rose Hill, a little village in the southern part of Illinois. Today, the population is 84, which is about half of what it was when she lived there. In the probably late 1800s, early 1900s. The citizens now are all white, and they're basically have an average of income of about $30,000 a year. Murdy's family were Irish immigrants who probably, from maybe 3 generations back, who probably came to escape the potato famine. They came to America for a better life. Yet, the women's lives never really changed. And I was told that her life turned out to be the same as her mother and their mother before that. My cousin said women in those times had to be subservient to men. When I asked why, I was told that was the only way they could get acceptance or even survive, for that matter. If you did exactly what men told you to do, then you were considered a good woman. Murdy was married to John Land, which was my last name. John and Murdy were just like everyone else in the village, tenant farmers who worked on small patches of land for absentee owners who could throw them off at will. John sometimes sold tickets at the train station just to put food on the table. They had 5 children, 4 girls and a boy. My father, who was a pet preemie with my Aunt Dolly Dean. His name was Dallas Dale, and the other children were named Iva, Mabel, and Beulah. Murdy never, ever left her tiny home where her children were born, all alone in a room with no help from anyone, not even her husband. He was touted as being handsome ladies' man, who my cousin said used Murdy as a punching bag, drank a lot. They told me this was typical of families at that time. According to their mother and aunts, and in the early 1900s, women, especially those in little rural villages, were considered not worthy of making decisions, and were not even able to escape their bad situations. 2 of Murdy's children, Iva and Mabel, were sent to mental institutions for warehousing so their husbands wouldn't have to take care of them in the winters when they couldn't be tending the crops. Murdy herself died at the age of 42 of pneumonia in one of those so-called mental institutions. Her children were just teenagers. Her 5 children were only teenagers. Mental hospitals were called lunatic asylums, and patients were locked up against their will. Women were diagnosed with melancholy. Is that surprising, given the living conditions they had? They didn't even enough money to escape or change their lives. And fathers, they hated lives of being a father, farmer. They were often mean, disinterested in their children. Their women actually were sex objects, kept in total isolation while taking care of all their children. They were labeled mentally ill as a convenience to get rid of them. Our family never knew if those labels were actually accurate. Or was it just a way to store women when they were no longer needed? The oldest girl, my Aunt Iva, spent much of her life in such institutions and escaped by committing suicide by drinking a bottle of Drano, which was the only thing she could get her hands on. Mabel's daughter, my cousin, said her father drank so much and beat his children and was terrible to the 5 kids that he never really wanted. Back in the early years of the 20th century, typically men didn't even sleep with their wives. They just used them for sex, breaking their wives' spirits, which in those days was labeled nervous breakdown. Women had no idea what they were getting into when they got married, usually at a very young age, and yet they really had no choice. Poverty was the lot of women, as my cousin described it. Myrtie's early death from pneumonia was when she was institutionalized and could have been from a lack of good food. Often enough, it was a can of beans that served as a meal. Or maybe it was getting impregnated too often for her health, suffering births and miscarriages over and over in rapid succession. Hygiene was impossible with no running water, and she had a very unsanitary outhouse. Because there were no appliances or electricity at the time, women just scrubbed their fingers to the bone. Their poor farms with constant labor created a complete lack of a social life for them. And still, they had to watch their husbands sleep with women from neighboring farms. Luckily, some of Liberty's children escaped to places where they could work and survive, although the girls ended up marrying men much like their fathers, who treated them like their mother was treated. Poor and with really no resources of their own. I'm so glad that my father went to a New England state where women were a little bit better educated, and he married my mother, who had a college degree and the skills to make a living. Unfortunately, my mother's mother, my other grandmother, died when my mother was only 5 years old, undoubtedly from the same kind of poor treatment, living isolated on a farm with no medical help. Poor medical help, isolated lives, these were the lot of women. Before modern conveniences existed and laws including women were enacted, women were handed down meager and cruel lives from generation to generation. And men had all the real power. Their lives improved a lot in the Roaring 20s and then, until the Great Depression. But before then, women, especially poor rural women, had lived under terrible conditions and did often die young. My parents protected me from these sad family stories. And yet I felt all my life that there was a bad side in my family just waiting to swallow me up. So all my life I've been a fighter for women and do all I can to ensure that they're treated as well as men. My fight for women's equality was to ensure that both my family and other acquaintances, all women, got a good education. I encouraged them to continue joining occupations that had been typically reserved for men. I became an aerospace engineer. And after earning master's degrees in business and in engineering, and also a doctorate degree, I began to sort of serve as a role model for some of the women. My struggles for women had the very sad truth that cruelty to women was the one reason I never had a grandmother, missing one of the greatest joys of my life.
I find it fascinating how the history of this country is really held in the individual stories that we all have. Thank you. Thank you, Karen. Our next teller tells a story entitled Teddy. Welcome Shirley Norkin. There she is.
10 years ago, on a bright sunny day, I took Polo, my beautiful white standard poodle, to Lake Hollywood Park. We were sitting on the lawn, surrounded by gorgeous trees and a view of the lake. Little by little, about 12 of Polo's friends joined us and sat quietly around him. A few of them curled up around him and sat very close. In a few hours, there would not be any more Polo. They seemed to know Polo's fate and came to say goodbye. It was the most amazing sight. My husband Ron was going to be lost without Polo. They were inseparable and even looked alike. Ron with his gorgeous white hair and Polo with his beautiful white fur. They were an extension of each other. As I expected when Polo passed, Ron would disappear into himself. It left me lonely and immobile. After 6 months, I couldn't handle it anymore, and I told Ron I was getting another dog. Even though he wasn't ready, there was nothing he could do about it to change my mind. Another dog would give him the right to start living again. I decided to go to Pet Adoption Fund in Canoga Park. There were so many dogs crammed into this yard with the sun beating down on them. It was a horrific sight. My eyes searched the yard and fell on a black miniature poodle named Teddy. When they brought him out, I knelt down and he began to lick my face furiously. He knew I was going to rescue him, and he started to turn round and round. When I mentioned his name, his eyes shot up. It was love at first sight. The following day, I went back to get Teddy, and I was so excited. They assured me he would love my cats, of which I had 2. I was blinded by Teddy. New owner and new dog couldn't wait to get out there. When we arrived home, my 2 cats were waiting for me. When Teddy saw them, he lunged and started chasing them around the house, and they were terrified. I separated them with a wooden gate I had in the house, and now I was faced with what to do. I took him for a walk in the neighborhood to collect my thoughts. I never had a dog who was so aggressive in his protection of me. I would worry about the problem later. Right now, I had to figure out a way for him to love my cats. The next day I found a trainer, but he couldn't start for a few days. And I called Pet Adoption Fund, and they said they would keep him until the trainer came. As I drove him back, I had this terrible feeling I shouldn't be leaving him there. He was pressed up against me, so tight and so loving and so trusting. I pulled up to the entrance and I could see all those poor dogs in that terrible cage, and I began to panic. Before I knew what was happening, a man came into my car, grabbed him and threw him over his shoulder and escaped with Teddy. I suddenly changed my mind about leaving him there, but by then he was gone. I tried to find the man, but the office was locked up and there was no one around. He just disappeared. I finally gave up and I left feeling scared and guilty. 2 days later, I called Pet Adoption Fund and told them I was picking up Teddy, and they told me I couldn't have him back, and they hung up on me. I called them back and no one would talk to me. I raced over there to get Teddy. When I arrived, a menacing woman with flaming red hair and the demeanor of Godzilla was waiting for me. Think, Roseanne Barr on a really bad day. I told them I had paid for Teddy and they had to give him back, and they said that they don't give donations back, they don't have to. I began to get very aggressive and hysterical, and 2 men grabbed me and threw me out. I was beyond stressed out. I went to the police, called the media, and everyone I knew. I went to an attorney who had the same problem with his dog, and he wouldn't take my case. The following day, with the help of a friend, I filed a lawsuit that would take 6 agonizing weeks before it would go to trial. During the 6 weeks, I saw this dog on Adopt Me, an online service where you could find dogs to adopt. His face beckoned to me. I decided I would meet this dog who lived in Palm Springs. He was really beautiful online, but when I met him, he was just a mangy dog who needed a home. I decided to take him home anyway. If he worked out, he would be a companion to Teddy and Ron. And maybe Teddy wouldn't bother my cats. I named him Ziggy. I took Ziggy to the groomer, and when he came out, he was gorgeous. What a surprise. He wouldn't stop loving me and licking me, and he loved my cats. Once again, we were one big happy family, and there was someone for Teddy to play with when I got him back. During the next 6 weeks before court, I couldn't stop thinking about Teddy. I was a mental case because I deserted him. Ziggy and the cats were of some comfort to me, but not enough. Ziggy knew I was in a lot of pain, and he wouldn't stop licking my face and trying to comfort me. The night before court, I went to this Chinese restaurant. When I got home, I had this terrible pain in my stomach, and I thought I had food poisoning.
I was rushed to the hospital, and all I remember hearing was, "We're going to have to operate." I ended up in the hospital for 4 months. I never got to court. I was in an induced coma and no one could reach me. They thought I was going to die. I know the stress I was suffering from Teddy was a major cause of my stomach infection. 2 weeks after I entered the hospital, my husband had a heart attack and ended up there too. He was traumatized by the situation and he just couldn't cope. When I left the hospital, it took me a year to recuperate. I had needles sticking out of every part of my body. During my recuperation, Ron died. 2 of the worst years of my life. Manny, my husband's caretaker, took Ziggy to visit me at the hospital. Although Ziggy was a comfort, I couldn't stop thinking about Teddy. When I got better, my constant companion was Ziggy. He was like a magnet, drawing people to me. Suddenly, I had friends, all because of Ziggy. I needed to get away, and Ron's niece from Palm Beach said she would take a trip with me to Croatia. It was a wonderful opportunity for me because I had no one to travel with. I found a sitter who stayed with my pets in the past, and she said she would stay at home with them. I felt safe leaving them with her, knowing she wouldn't be gone for more than a couple of hours. Ziggy suffered from extreme separation anxiety. On my flight home, I told my friend, every time I take a trip, some terrible thing happens to me. I was filled with anxiety the entire time I was going home. When I arrived, the house sitter was waiting for me with a big smile. My cats were all over me. But where was Ziggy? Without any emotion, she said, "He died." The pain and shock was worse than when I got sick. Manny, the man who lives downstairs, said she left him home alone for 8 hours a day and went to work. She lied when she promised she would only be gone for a couple of hours a day. 2 days after my terrible loss, I saw this dog on Pet Adopt, where I found Ziggy. His name was Doobie. He had a face that called out, "Come get me." He had been passed around to 5 different shelters, and it was hard to locate him. Finally, I found him in Newport Beach. I needed a dog to fill this terrible hole that Ziggy left. I now have Doobie, a white Jack Russell poodle. He is very energetic and attacks almost anyone who comes near me when I take a walk. We walk every day. We eat our meals together, and when I eat out, he shares whatever I eat. At night, he sits in my lap and watches CNN with me. And when he's ready to go to bed, he looks up and says, "Hey Mom, it's time to go to bed." I take him downstairs to his little bed, and life with Doobie starts all over again in the morning when we have breakfast together. He's the perfect companion and the most important little guy in my life. Now, if he would only love my cats. In my lifetime, I've had 8 dogs and 30 cats. I love them all. They were my children, but I still think about Teddy. I wonder if someone loves him as much as I did. He was just one of those affairs that I will never get over. Thank you.
is coming up. Skiing, anyone? Welcome Sam Hollow.
Before I tell, I would just like to say thank you for everybody for coming, and thank you, Anne, for giving us this wonderful forum to express our thoughts and our ideals and our memories and all of our aspirations. In the winter of 1979, my wife Patty and I were invited to go skiing to join our friends May and Alan in the Pyrenees. So we found a cheapy flight with an airline called Spandex. For $299 round trip, we were supposed to fly into Barcelona and home from Rome. I rented a car. Well, I prepared to rent a car from Avis. It was going to be a one-way that we'd pick up in Barcelona, drive into the mountains, and then drive down to Rome afterwards and return. Everything was planned. So we showed up at the East Imperial Terminal of LAX. That should have been some indication. Boarded the plane. We took off fine. As we're going across the United States, we knew we were going to land in New York for refueling and to take on passengers. But on the way, the stewardesses changed costumes 3 times. They didn't serve us a meal, never served us drinks, but they had this music playing and they were sort of like doing this little dance thing in between. Another sign. As we approach LaGuardia, I'm sitting in the window seat, I'm looking out, and we start coming down. I'm looking out, there's no beacons. We're right over the tops of houses. We're about 1,000 feet up. Where's the airport? And all of a sudden, the pilot starts to climb. The plane shudders a little bit. I thought, that's interesting. About 10 minutes later, same thing, glide pattern. Here we come, down, right on top of the houses. No airport. Oh my gosh. This time when he accelerates, shuddering, the engines are smoking, and I start to smell it burning. I'm going, oh, this is really not good. Third time's a charm. I can see the landing lights. We're over LaGuardia. He comes in really steep, right on the nose. Locks up the brakes and skids to a stop. The engines fail. We had to be towed to the terminal. So we're sitting in the terminal for 4 hours, and they're supposed to do some work on the plane. Then it's announced our flight's canceled, and we would have to find other way to get to our destination. So it's like middle of the night at this point, and we go from place to place to try to get as close to our destination as we could. Finally, we get in with Air France to fly into Toulouse. Air France is fabulous. They serve us a good meal. Everything is orderly. We take off on time. We land on time. Great. I go to the Avis rental car place, tell them I want a one-way. They said, no problem, just upgrade to a mid-size. So I get a Ford Fiesta. And they gave me a little map of the area, but it wasn't a map of the Pyrenees. But I could see the mountains in the distance, so we start driving that way. At about 8 o'clock, we were pretty hungry. Now, we haven't slept, except on the plane. It's been 27 hours since we left LA. We stopped for dinner at this local place. It was really good fare, and the placemat was a map of the mountains, because that's where they do the Tour de France up this windy road, and that's where we wanted to go. So we sort of knew where we were going, and we were sort of chatting with the customers and our server, and the server kept saying, La Frontière Fermée à midi. And we went, oh, that's nice. And we kept eating and so on and so forth. When we were leaving, they followed us out, and they were pointing up the hill, and they were saying, La Frontière Fermée à midi. So it's like 9:30 at night. We get in the car and we're driving, and the light bulb goes on over Patty's head. From her high school French, the border closes at midnight, Sam. And we don't know how far away we are. And it had been raining, so the road was all potholed, and there was a point where we had to cross a stream and was running water. So I got out and threw some rocks in so we could cross over to the other side. Now we're in a blizzard. As we approach the top of the hill, 12:45, we can see the guard shack through the clouds. The guard never comes out, he just goes like this. We made it, so we made it over the top. Now we have to find Bakira Barrett. And I found one of those signposts with like 12 different directions on it, and it says Bakira Barrett 35 clicks this way. So we go along the little mountain road, and finally at 2:30 in the morning, we find a hotel. Nobody's up, but they've left our key at the front desk with a note, room 106. Great. Get our bags, take the key, and head to our room. Just before we go in, I notice the door next door has the key in the knob. And I'm thinking, oh gosh, May, she's so forgetful. So I pull the key out so nobody will disturb her. We go to bed. 6:30 in the morning, knocking on the door. Get up, sleepyhead. There's powder outside. You didn't come all this way to sleep in. So there we are. After 3 hours of sleep, we get woken up and go down to breakfast. What was the topic of breakfast? Alan's father, whose last posting was a British ambassador to Rome, had gone down in the middle of the night to get some milk because he couldn't sleep and left his key in the door. And somebody had taken it, so he had to wake up the night watchman to get back in his room. That key was burning a hole in my pocket. So after breakfast, I sort of slipped it off to the front desk. Nobody saw. I thought I was out of the woods. So we're going to go skiing, but we have no gear. So they found the ski shack, and it was really a shack. And so we got this old junky gear. I got some ski boots that were too small and frozen. And the skis that they fitted me with were 235s. They were way too long, and they were racing skis, and you couldn't turn them. You had to jump stop. There was no way to turn these skis. And we crossed the street. Where's the lift? No lift. It's a rope tow. So we slept 3.5 hours. We have just, gotten through all of this mess to get there. Now we're holding on this rope going up the hill, and it's rocks and snow and ice. And if you didn't make it, the next person behind would run right over you, so you could barely, let go. Finally, half an hour later, we're at the top of the hill, and we're ready to head down. But it's not like Mammoth, where it's all groomed. There's no trail markers, there's no map. All there is a ski patrol, but the ski patrol are these cadets, young men in the military, and it's their job to terrorize the tourists. They come by and blow snow on you, and if there's any rock outcroppings, they try to jump over your heads and laugh all the way. I planned my revenge. I had these long skis, and they weren't going to let this silly American beat them down the hill, so I let them run, and I built up speed, and here they come, 3 of them chasing after me. I look ahead, and I can see where there was a drop-off, so I did a hockey stop, and here they go, whoosh, 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 right out in the air. Adios, amigos. So we skied off down into the lower bowl. It was really very nice. We get down there to the high-speed lift. Only problem is the lift's not working. It's broken down. So we had to wait 5 hours to get the bus back to the lodge. Well, we skied a few more days, but the best part were the evenings and going out to dinner every night. Because we're in Basque Country, each of the little villages had their own specialty. This one night it was seafood. And we're sitting there, and they had a wonderful table with fresh French bread and mussels, a tureen of mussels, my favorite. They start passing them around the table, but I'm on my best behavior because of the key incident. So when the mussels came to me, I daintily took 2 off and put them on my plate and passed it on, thinking as soon as it goes around, I'll be able to get those and eat them all. Wrong. They went around the backside of the table and they whisked them away. I'm still chasing those mussels. Well, after a few days of dining and skiing, we headed down the hill, and with our friend May and her little daughter Isa in tow, into the French countryside. First place we stopped was Lourdes, which was absolutely beautiful. I got to pray at the little altar there where everybody had hung up their canes after they were miraculously healed. And we were going to stop for lunch, so May said, just look for the church steeple in the next town. There's always something to eat around the church. So we go into the next town. And sure enough, there's a church steeple. I parked the car and we start walking down this lane following our nose. We walked by a little house that had the window open and great smells coming out. May went in with her best friend and asked, can we have lunch with you folks? Sure enough. So we sat down with the town folk, about 8 of us around the table, and there was this woman there in her 80s and said she had never left this town her entire life. She was born there and she hoped to die there. Could she hold the baby and do a blessing? So we passed the baby around the table until it came to her and she did her blessing on the baby. After lunch, we headed on our way, and we had to drop May off to fly back. She was living in Madrid, so we stopped at Toulouse at the airport, dropped her off, and then we decided, well, let's go to the coast. It's the Côte d'Azur right there, and we ended up driving the really curvy, nice road, and ended up at the casino. Monte Carlo, thank you very much. I've said it so many times it has to exit at this point. And as we decided we want to go and see the casino, but before that, Patty said, I know the Negresco Hotel is just over there. It's very famous. Let's see if we can get in for the night. So sure enough, we were able to get into the Negresco, got cleaned up. So we're heading across the street to the casino. And before you walk in, there's this big sign that says, no recording devices of any kind. And we had a brand new Nikon camera, 35 millimeter with all of our pictures on it. What does Patty do? She takes a picture of the chandelier. What's in the chandelier? All of their cameras so that they can keep a track of it. So the gendarme comes out, takes her by the arm, pushes this mirror and goes behind it. Before I can catch up, the door closes and I can't get to her. I'm thinking, excuse me, she'll be out in a few minutes. Wrong. 45 minutes later, she's escorted out. The camera, she had stripped the gears out of the camera and told us we had to leave town immediately. So we did. That was just part of our trip. We made our way, on our way to Rome. We stopped at several little towns along the way, no reservations, just the love in our heart, and we really had a great time. We get to Rome, we had reservations just outside of the Vatican on what is it called now? Ambassador Row. It was an old ambassador that had been turned into a hotel. So we could see it, but I couldn't drive there because of so many one-way streets. So we parked the car and took a cab. We get to the hotel and I tell the doorman, could you go pick up my car and bring it? I tipped him $50. He brought the car. And after that, we either walked or cabbed around town. The last night that we're there, we grabbed a cab and said, take us to your favorite local restaurant. And so he said, well, it's just around the corner, you can walk, but it was raining. And we said, no, please take us there. So he takes us to this little restaurant, there's no sign on it. We walk in, we're the only non-natives there, the Arab and the English lass. And so we were, quite the spectacle. Shown to this nice table, and the waiter comes, and it had been raining and there was water dripping, and he wanted to make a joke because I'm an Arab. He says, if we're in your country, that water dripping would be oil and we'd all be getting rich. And then he apologized and said, we don't have a menu, it's all appetizers. All around, on every ledge, there was a different kind of appetizers. He said, it's help yourself, same thing with the wine, help yourself. So we had a great evening of dining and drinking, and about midnight, with the bells of St. Peter's ringing, we went back to our hotel and fell asleep. 6:30 in the morning, we had to be up to make it to the airport. Sure enough, we get to the airport just in time, go to the Avis counter to turn the car in, but the guy says, you're gonna have to pay double. This car has to go back to France. I said, no, I paid extra for the intermediate sized car. I said, car's at the curb, keys are in it, here's the receipt. See ya. We still had a few lira in our pocket before we got on the plane. We hit the bar one more time and poured ourselves on the plane for a flight home, smooth sailing.
And hey, Sam, there were no costume changes.
No.
On the yeah. Well, it can be over, or I could tell a story, but it's been a long concert. I will go for it. Let's see. Oh, this is The Best I Can Be, the title of it. I sat at my mom's desk in Tucson, Arizona. It was August 2022. I'd given myself 2 weeks to empty out the unit, to prepare it for renting. My folks had been gone over 6 years. A safe sat on the desk, a waterproof, fireproof safe, locked. Where was the key? The drawers were full of memorabilia. More was in the closet, boxes of books, photographs, clothes, even flatware. I didn't know where to begin. I needed help. And the sun was rising over the Rincon Mountains. Orange light filtered into the room. The thermometer read the low 80s. A monsoon had blown through last night, cool in the morning. It was now or never. I took off for the Saguaro Forest. It would be my last hike on Cactus Forest Trail in 2022, and the monsoons had worked their wonders. As far as my eye could see, the desert floor was green with splashes of yellow wildflowers. Over 3 hours later, I was sitting back at my mom's desk, refreshed, sorting and tossing. No, I had not wanted to give up that unit. I'd wanted to keep it, a museum of memories where I could retreat and study in desert quiet, where I could nourish another being who lived inside of me. But a friend said a house needs to be lived in, so I decided to give it up. But on the plus side, after 2 weeks of packing and boxing, I'd acquired a new skill. Have you ever seen a Scotch ceiling tape dispenser? Noticed its 2-inch row of serrated metal teeth? It's a weapon. Took me 30 boxes to figure out how to use it without injury. Move-in day came. 6 hours later, the unit was stripped, empty of the care Mom had taken in furnishing it, empty of that coffee table holding the tokens of a lifetime of travels. But I knew those walls would always hold my memories, standing in the kitchen the day Mom died, my daughter's arms around me. I knew those windows would always look out on the Tucson mountains, and I hoped that thrasher would keep on piping his hollow notes into morning and evening air. It was mid-afternoon now. I had a car full of boxes, one to deliver to my brother Joe in Yuma, where he lived with his beloved Donna, where we were both raised, where I had not returned in years. Joe said, give us a call when you're about a half hour out. We'll have dinner on the table. I did. After dinner, a young couple stopped by. Joe said, you don't recognize him, do you? That's one of the Curtis grandsons. I knew his grandparents. They'd been our neighbors. Suddenly a piece of me fell into place. I belonged here. I knew so many of the stories threading through the generations, stories I was part of, stories that made this community what it was, and what it is, and what it could be. The next morning I told my brother, I'm going to take a walk through our old neighborhood before I go. Be back in a bit. And I walked past my old elementary school where I spent hours of kickball and tetherball, into the old neighborhood, a Baptist church still on the corner. The neighborhood was the same, but different. Once empty lots now held houses, and different without all our playmates tumbling in and out of each other's homes, riding our bikes, shooting marbles in the alley. But our house was well tended. The rainbirds were on. Ka-cha, ka-cha. Joe and I used to run through those sprinklers. Mission accomplished. I headed back to Joe's and Donna's, said a quick goodbye and thank you. Donna said, come back anytime, you're always welcome. That's always good to hear. I drove out 4th Avenue, past my old junior high school, looming sturdy in its red brick. There was a sign in front and a message on it. It's never too late to be the best you can be. That knocked the wind out of me. I thought, was our country being knocked to its knees so it would deepen its commitment to justice, learn to love our neighbors as ourselves, be the best nation we could be? Was I being asked to reckon with my own self? As I drove over the Colorado River, waved past Border Patrol through the sand dunes, I thought, so much had happened the last 2 weeks. Sorting through generations of memories, giving up my folks' unit. I felt as if something precious was being torn from me. I felt an emptiness. I thought of my ancestors who'd come to this land, made a place for themselves, even as I had left Yuma for Los Angeles, found work, found a family. Thought of my mother-in-law, Lula. She lived with us a couple years, her declining years. Sometimes she'd tell me, I want to go home. I'd remind her, you are home, Lula. You live with Ricky and me now. Once I took her out our front door so she could look around. Later she told me I couldn't find where I was going, and I kind of knew how she felt. On that 5.5-hour drive back to Malibu, a word came to me, devotions. And I knew it's what I needed to help me find where I was going, where I belonged. I began studying again. Wisdom literature, be it Christian or Buddhist or Muslim or Sikh. In those pages, I found the calories I needed to face the day. People would tell me, have a good day. I think, how? The world's falling apart. We've desecrated the earth. It finally came to me, I could never have a good day unless I made a good day. A good day is not for the taking, it's for the making. Meanwhile, my husband was practicing intermittent fasting to lose weight. It worked. He walked in the kitchen one morning and said, I have an idea. It's about intermittent living. Amazing how our thoughts intersect. Intermittent living interrupts the rush of doing. He told me once, I think I've gone past my limit there. I looked at my own rushing and doing. I know I'd exceeded my own limit. Well, I had exceeded my limit. Right here, I've exceeded my limit. Now what? You know, it's funny how stories will mix up in your head. Trying to figure out where to go from here, from where I was. On that 5.5-hour drive back to back to Malibu from Yuma, that word came to me, devotions. Did I tell you that already? I did, okay. Those devotions of mine often begin with a morning walk. There might still be a moon hanging in the western sky. I might hear the mutter of an owl. Soon the eastern horizon blossoms into orange and pink. I might cross paths with coyote or deer or snail or skunk, and I inhale the breath of chaparral, the sweet musk of earth. It's these moments, these devotions that fill my empty, that measure me into the day, that remind me wherever I am is holy ground. Wherever I am, I belong. And it's never too late to use the best of me to make a good day. Thank you all for coming. And thank you, tellers. Uh-oh, Lydia's on it. If you want to find out more about storytelling, you can talk to anybody here. Oh, we're going to take a picture of all of us.
Where's the boy? Yeah, the building.
We have a special token for Anne. She has done so much for us. And in appreciation of her sharing her home, her time, her stories, her knowledge, and especially her patience with us, we have this little thought for her that says, "Dear Anne, we love and appreciate you, yours truly," and then we each have written a message for her. Thank you, Anne.
You know, Lydia used to teach elementary school. She is so good at this stuff. Thank you, everybody. Okay, let me put this down.
No, get rid of the mic.
No, we can stand up there. Wait, some of us can see that.
We're getting a picture of all of us.
Okay.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Can somebody see us? Yes, please.
Go ahead if you want to. Thank you for staying so we can talk to you after.
Get close because we're talking.
You know, I was talking to Trish before. Oh, it's off now.
Everyone will hear you.
And it's still
No,
on.
I was just talking to Trish beforehand, and we were talking about how when you are developing your personal
Stories, how you discover things about yourself. And that's what's one thing that's so important. And you also, as you reveal that and tell them, you're becoming a community because people are getting to know you better and love you and appreciate you better. And I can appreciate you more if I know you better. So we need to tell our stories.